Justice, when it arrives late, is a complicated guess. It brings relief, but also the sharp, undeniable pain of what, and who, has been lost in the intervening years. In April of 2024, after a quarter of a century spent in a torturous limbo, the family of Kathleen O'Dowd Boleman finally received the news they had long given up on. An arrest had been made in her murder, but the moment was not one of pure celebration. A conspicuous absence, a ghost at the long-awaited feast of justice. Haunted IT.in, a statement that captured the profound, bittersweet nature of this breakthrough. Kathleen's sister shared the family's heart-wrenching reality with the world. When the newness of this wears off, we will take comfort in knowing that justice will finally be served. I just wish our mother was here to see this moment. That single sentence encapsulates the generational toll of a cold case. It speaks of a mother who went to her grave without answers, a family for whom justice would always be incomplete. For 25 years, the murder of Kathleen Boleman was a story without an ending. A 41-year-old woman, a wife and a mother, was brutally strangled and left behind a school, and the silence that followed her death was nearly as violent as the act itself. The case file grew cold, gathering dust as the world moved on, threatening to relegate Kathleen's memory to a forgotten statistic, but one detective refused to let that happen. This is not a story of a last-minute DNA match from a genealogy website, nor a deathbed confession. This is the story of how a case was cracked open by something far more fundamental, yet increasingly rare: the relentless, methodical, and deeply human persistence of an investigator who put fresh eyes on an old file and made a silent promise to a family that he would not give up. How did one detective, armed with little more than old witness statements and a refusal to quit, turn the faded whispers of the past into a modern-day indictment? This is the story of the 25-year echo and the man who finally listened. The day the music stopped, Providence, March 11th, 1999. The year was 1999. The world was holding its breath, caught between the end of a century and the dawn of a new millennium. In Providence, Rhode Island, life moved at its own steady pace, a city of neighborhoods, of families, of routines. It was in this world that 41-year-old Kathleen O'Dowd Boleman lived. To her family, she was not the future victim of a headline-grabbing crime. She was simply Kathleen, described by those who loved her as vibrant and larger than life. She was a wife and a waitress, the mother of 4 children and one of 7 siblings. She was a fixture in her community, a woman in the prime of her life, with a future that seemed as solid as the city's historic cobblestone streets. But on Thursday, March 11th, 1999, that future was stolen. The vibrant, larger-than-life woman was silenced forever. Her body was discovered in a place that should have been a symbol of safety and innocence, behind the Roger Williams Middle School. The cause of death was brutal and intimate: strangulation. The discovery sent a shockwave through the community, a violent intrusion into the city's daily life. The location of the crime amplified the horror. A middle school campus is a space dedicated to the promise of youth, a place of learning and growth. To have it desecrated by such a violent act created a deep and lasting psychological scar. One man, who did not wish to be identified, recalled the feeling to a local news crew in 2024. He was just a boy at the time, on the verge of becoming a student at that very school. "I just remember them finding a body back there," he said, the memory still clear after 25 years. "And I was just getting ready to go to Roger Williams Middle School. So it was kind of creepy." That sense of creepiness, of a sanctuary violated, lingered for years. The murder of Kathleen Boleman was not just an attack on one woman. It was an assault on the community's sense of security. It transformed a familiar schoolyard into a place of macabre fascination and fear, a stark reminder that violence could erupt in the most unexpected of places. For Kathleen's family, the shock was absolute. Their world, once filled with her vibrant presence, was now defined by a sudden, violent, and inexplicable void. The music had stopped, and a long, deafening silence was about to begin. A ghost in the system. The 1999 investigation and the wall of silence. In the immediate aftermath of the discovery, the Providence Police Department launched a full-scale homicide investigation. Detectives canvassed the area, collected evidence, and began the painstaking process of piecing together Kathleen Boleman's final hours. Unlike many murders that remain complete mysteries for years, investigators in 1999 quickly zeroed in on a person of interest. His name was Kevin Williams. Official statements released in 2024 are remarkably consistent and clear on this point. Early in their investigation, Providence police detectives developed the defendant as a suspect. This was not a case with a dozen potential leads or a faceless, unknown assailant. From the outset, there was a name, a face, and a focus. The path to justice seemed, at first, to be a short one, but that path soon hit a dead end. The initial momentum of the investigation slowed, then stalled, then stopped altogether. The reason was a common but deeply frustrating hurdle in the world of criminal justice. As the Rhode Island Attorney General's office would later state, despite their strong suspicions, detectives in 1999 were unable to develop sufficient evidence to charge him at the time. This distinction between suspicion and proof is the chasm where countless cases fall, becoming cold and dormant. In 1999, the forensic landscape was vastly different. While DNA testing existed, the large-scale, searchable databases like Cody's were in their infancy. The CSI effect had not yet permeated the public consciousness or the courtroom. An investigation relied heavily on tangible evidence that could be directly linked to a suspect, and, most importantly, on the testimony of cooperative witnesses. It is in this gap that the Boleman case went cold. Perhaps the physical evidence was purely circumstantial. Perhaps key witnesses were afraid to speak, or their accounts were not strong enough to convince a prosecutor they could win a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. Whatever the specific reasons, the result was the same. The evidence they had was not enough. The threshold for an arrest, let alone a conviction, could not be met. This created a uniquely agonizing situation. For the police and for Kathleen's family, this was not a whodunit. It was a how do we prove it. The man they believed was responsible for Kathleen's death was walking free. Not because he was an unknown phantom, but because the legal system, with its high burden of proof, could not touch him. The active investigation wound down. The case file, filled with notes, reports, and the name of a suspect they couldn't charge, was eventually boxed up and placed into storage. Kathleen Boleman's murder became a ghost in the system, a solved case that remained, paradoxically, unsolved. The weight of unanswered questions, a family's 25-year vigil for the investigators, a cold case is a professional failure, a puzzle left unsolved. For a family, it is a life sentence. As the years stretched into decades, the Boleman family was forced to serve that sentence, living with the crushing weight of unanswered questions. The initial shock and grief of Kathleen's murder slowly morphed into a chronic, low-grade agony, the pain of not knowing, of having no closure, of seeing no justice. Kathleen's brother later articulated the grim resignation that had settled over the family. "We were learning to live with it, you know," he told a reporter. "We didn't think it would get solved. They thought it was just, another statistic. But to become a statistic is to be stripped of one's humanity. It is to have a life, a vibrant and larger-than-life personality, reduced to a case number in a dusty file." This was the fear that haunted Kathleen's 4 children and 7 siblings. They navigated life's milestones, birthdays, graduations, weddings, with a permanent shadow over them. Every family gathering was a reminder of the empty chair, the missing laugh, and the unresolved violence that had taken her from them. The pain and frustration, they learned, did not fade with time. It simply became a part of their existence, a scar that never fully healed. For 24 years, there was silence. The case was, for all intents and purposes, dormant. The family heard nothing. The world moved on. Then, sometime around 2023, after nearly a quarter century of waiting, the phone rang. About a year ago, Kathleen's brother recalled. A Providence police detective called him to let him know they were making progress in the case. That single phone call was a seismic event. It was the first glimmer of hope in a generation. The decision by the detective to reach out to the family before an arrest was imminent was a profoundly compassionate and strategic act of police work. It acknowledged their decades of suffering and began the process of rebuilding trust. It signaled that Kathleen was no longer just a statistic. She was the focus of a renewed, determined effort. This was not a surprise press conference. but a quiet, deliberate communication that prepared the family for the emotional journey ahead. The long winter of the cold case was beginning to thaw. A detective had picked up the file, and he wasn't going to put it down. The Cold Case Bulldog. The work of Detective Angelo Avant. Cold cases are no longer about stumbling upon a forgotten box in a dusty evidence locker. Modern cold case units are deliberate, strategic operations. They are staffed by investigators who possess a unique combination of patience, skepticism, and an obsessive attention to detail. They must be part historians, part psychologists, and part bulldogs, unwilling to let go of a case simply because time has passed. In Providence, that bulldog was Detective Angelo Avant. In recent years, Detective Avant of the Providence Police Department approached the Kathleen Boleman case with what officials would later call fresh eyes. He took on the tedious investigation, a task that required him to travel back in time 25 years and reconstruct a world that no longer existed. His work was not a single, brilliant stroke of insight, but a grinding, methodical process, the very definition of diligent police work. The official press releases from both the Providence Police and the Rhode Island Attorney General's office provide a clear roadmap of his methodology. First, he re-examined all the original evidence. Every report, every photograph, every piece of physical evidence collected in 1999 was scrutinized anew. He was looking for details that may have been missed, connections that were not made, or avenues that were not fully explored. Second, he began the arduous task of re-interviewing the original witnesses. This is one of the greatest challenges in any cold case. People move. Memories fade. Some witnesses may have passed away. For those he could find, Detective Avant had to rebuild rapport and gently coax their minds back to a traumatic event that happened a generation ago. But the third step in his process was the one that ultimately broke the case wide open. Detective Avant, in partnership with prosecutors, succeeded in developing new witnesses. This phrase is the key to the entire resolution. It signifies that Avant's work went beyond simply reviewing the old file. He generated fresh leads and found people with new information, people who had either never been spoken to in 1999 or who were now willing to say what they had been unwilling or too afraid to say back then. Time can be an enemy to an investigation, but it can also be an ally. Allegiances shift, relationships crumble, and the burden of a long-held secret can grow heavy. Detective Avant's persistence likely capitalized on these changes, persuading people to finally break a 25-year silence, in an era where cold cases are often solved by breakthroughs in forensic science. The resolution in the Boleman case stands as a powerful testament to the enduring value of traditional detective work. The official announcements make no mention of new DNA analysis or advanced forensic genealogy. The credit is given squarely to the human element of the investigation. The case had gone cold because of a lack of actionable human intelligence, and it was solved by a detective who was skilled enough to finally acquire it. His success was lauded at the highest levels. Attorney General Peter F. Noronha stated, "I am grateful to the Providence Police Department and Detective Avant, whose persistence and diligent efforts have brought us to this place today." Providence Police Colonel Oscar L. Perez, Jr. added his praise, saying, "I thank Detective Angelo Avant for leading this tedious investigation." Through sheer determination, Detective Avant had gathered what his predecessors could not: sufficient evidence. He had built a bridge across a 25-year gap, and he was now ready to present his case. The indictment and the arrest. Justice in motion with the new evidence in hand. Detective Avant and prosecutors from the Rhode Island Attorney General's office, led by Assistant Attorney General James R. Baum and Special Assistant Attorney General Ariel Pittner, moved forward. They presented their revitalized case to a Providence County grand jury, a panel of citizens who would decide if there was now probable cause to formally charge Kevin Williams with murder. That on April 12, 2024, the grand jury delivered its decision. They returned a secret indictment charging Kevin Williams with the murder of Kathleen O'Dowd Boleman. The indictment was sealed, a crucial legal tactic. After 25 years of living as a free man, an open announcement of the charge could have given the suspect an opportunity to flee. The secret indictment allowed law enforcement to control the final act of this long investigation. A warrant was issued for his arrest. 4 days later, on the morning of April 16, 2024, the wait was over. Providence Police detectives located a now 53-year-old Kevin Williams on Road Street in Providence. For a man who had been a suspect since 1999, the moment of his arrest was reportedly quiet and uneventful. He was apprehended without incident. The man taken into custody that day was not just a ghost from a 1999 case file. He was a man with a present-day life, one that included other legal troubles. At the time of his arraignment for the murder of Kathleen Boleman, Williams was also charged with a separate, pending offense, violating a domestic no-contact order. While this charge is legally distinct from the murder accusation, it provides a startling piece of context. It suggests a pattern of behavior that, for the public and the victim's family, resonates with the nature of the decades-old crime he is accused of committing. It paints a picture of the man who, for 25 years, lived among them. The arrest marked a monumental step, transforming a cold case into an active prosecution and setting the stage for a courtroom confrontation a quarter of a century in the making. The face of justice. A courtroom confrontation on April 17, 2024, one day after his arrest, Kevin Williams was brought into Providence County Superior Court for his arraignment. The secret indictment was unsealed, and he was formally charged with the murder of Kathleen O'Dowd Boleman. For the court, it was the start of a new legal proceeding. Case number P1-2024-1206A. But for Kathleen's family, seated in the gallery, it was a moment they had waited 25 years to see. For the first time, they laid eyes on the man they had long believed was responsible for their sister's death. The space between them was no longer a vast, silent gulf of time, but the few dozen feet of a courtroom. The emotion in that room was palpable, a mixture of grief, relief, and a generation of suppressed rage. Kathleen's brother described the immense strain of that confrontation, the primal urge for retribution clashing with the decorum of the court. It was tough, he admitted. Not getting up and doing anything. But there were several sheriffs there between all of us. He was then asked if the anger was still there after all this time. His answer was immediate and unequivocal. Yes. It was a stark reminder that while the case file may have been cold, the family's anger and pain had never lost their heat. In that moment, Kevin Williams was no longer an abstract name from a police file. He was a physical presence, the focus of 25 years of a family's anguish. Following the arraignment, Williams was ordered to be held without bail. His next hearing scheduled for April 24th to determine his legal representation. As this case moves forward through the Rhode Island justice system, it is essential to remember a foundational principle of that system. A principle stated clearly in every official document related to this indictment. An indictment, information, or complaint is merely an allegation. A defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. The indictment is not a conclusion. It is the beginning of a new, public chapter in this long and painful story. An unclosed chapter. The arrest of Kevin Williams was a monumental victory for the Boleman family and for the Providence Police Department. It was a testament to the power of persistence and a declaration that time does not diminish the value of a life lost. But an arrest is not an ending. For the family, the breakthrough brought a complex and conflicting wave of emotions, as Kathleen's brother explained. The relief was immediately followed by a fresh wave of pain. They were very happy he was caught, he said of his family. But now it brings it all out again. And brings up the whole thing all over again for these kids. The resolution of a cold case does not erase the trauma. It forces a family to relive it, this time under the harsh glare of public and legal scrutiny. The indictment is a major step toward justice, but the road ahead is long. The case is still ongoing. A trial must now take place, where the evidence painstakingly gathered by Detective Avant will be presented and challenged. The family must endure the legal process, with all its delays and uncertainties, in the hope of finally hearing a jury declare a verdict. Ultimately, the story of Kathleen Boleman's case is one of dualities. It is a story of profound loss and incredible persistence. It is a story of a community's fear and a family's unwavering love. And it is a powerful reminder that behind every cold case file lies a human being, a family, and a story waiting for its final chapter to be written. Thanks to the work of one dedicated detective, that chapter for Kathleen Boleman is now, finally, underway.